Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah khair once again for joining us for another Sunnah session. Today I'm also going live from my personal profile just to increase the awareness. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, tonight it's Friday night. It's 9 o'clock. Every Friday at 9 we go live with the Sunnah session program that we used to conduct at the TarbiyaLive. Essentially, we examine one of the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and to try to apply the lessons of that hadith to our lives and try to understand a little snapshot into the life of our beloved Prophet ﷺ. So please go ahead and get something out to take notes if you'd like to do that. I know some of you do. Otherwise, just sit tight. We'll go on for about maybe 30 minutes, maybe less, and call it a night. And of course, I always remind all of you to please share the link. We're live on YouTube, we're live on Facebook, we're live on Instagram, and this is an effort to reach as many people as possible, to connect with as many people as possible, and give people the feeling and the sense of community and connectedness, and the opportunity to understand their deen while they are disconnected, maybe physically. So tonight's section is titled, and you'll have to forgive me, I mistakenly did not, on Facebook and on YouTube, I didn't fix the this part right here, and it should actually just read the name of the hadith. So tonight, inshallah, the hadith that we're going over, I called it the obligations and nothing else. And you'll see why when we go over the hadith. This hadith, if you are interested in following along with the actual wording of the hadith, it can be found in the books of Imam Muslim, but more easily probably in the collection of Imam al-Nawawi, hadith number 22. So if you want to look that up, you can follow along hadith 22 of Imam al-Nawawi. So without further ado, we'll just go into the hadith and then into the lessons. عن جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري رضي الله عنهما أن رجلا سأل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال أرأيت إذا صليت المكتوبات وصمت رمضان وأحللت الحلال وحرمت الحرام ولم أزد على ذلك شيئا أأدخل الجنة؟ قال نعم. رواه Imam Muslim. So in translation, this hadith comes to us from Jabir, the son of Abdullah, both of whom were companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be pleased with both of them. A man, so Jabir ibn Abdullah, he observes that a man came to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said, "What do you think, or what is your opinion, if I pray the obligatory prayers, and I fast in Ramadan, and I treat the halal as permissible, I treat the haram as impermissible, and I do not add to that anything? Will I enter Jannah? Will I enter paradise?" And so the Prophet ﷺ responded, and as the hadith says, he said, yes. And again, narrated particularly in the collection of Imam Muslim. So in order to cover this hadith, I wanted to break it into three sections. Number one, I feel like it's important for us to understand the narrator of this hadith in order to understand some of the values and lessons of the hadith, as well as a little bit about the individual who's asking the question. It's not the same as the narrator, right? Number two, we need to go into some of the prophetic wisdom that is revealed here. And for me, this is probably the most important piece, right? We have to look into this snapshot of the life of the Prophet ﷺ as more than just a technical statement about halal and haram. We get an opportunity to, like I said, like a window into his life, right? Wouldn't you want to peer into that window and see how the Prophet ﷺ was So for me, this is probably the most important and the most exciting piece. And then number 3, also very important. We want to look at this hadith and what it tells us at face value, and then what it tells us with a little bit of a deeper understanding, and how those two things might actually be quite different. But in summary, so basically what's happening in this hadith, there's a simple man who lives a very simple life, and he is having this opportunity to ask the Prophet ﷺ, maybe the 1 or 2 times that he might actually get an audience with the Prophet ﷺ. He goes to him and he says, if he maintains the very basics of his religion, if he just maintains these basic, simple fara'id of Islam, if he is then good with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ, in very simple terms, says yes. For me, this hadith in particular, it reminds me of something that I kind of picked up from one of my teachers. He uses this statement a lot. He says, my grandmother's Islam, or my mother's Islam. And it reminds me also of my grandmother's Islam. My grandmother, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with her and give her a high place in Jannah. She just passed away some months ago, actually. She used to live with us, and I would observe her on a daily basis, right? And she was bedridden. She couldn't really get up on her own towards the end of her life, and spent most of her time in her room. But she had her Quran. She had her collection of surahs. She had a few stories of companions. Some of those stories authentic, some of them maybe not. She had some little readings here and there, and some poetry that she would recite that she picked up. This is a woman who came from a very simple village in the middle of Pakistan. Yes, she then came to the United States and lived here, but really even here all she knew was her family, her loved ones. That was her world, her neighbors. Maybe the few ladies she met when she tried to go to classes to learn English and didn't pick up much. I mean, subhanAllah, I've been giving khutbah for years, and really she did not attend. I don't know if she attended any, maybe 1 or 2. And the khutbahs are in English. She definitely didn't pick up what I was saying, despite the fact that she was probably very, she seemed very proud of me. But it just reminds me that when I see the way that she practiced her deen, it wasn't complicated, it wasn't sophisticated, it was not filled with, intricate arguments and discussions about what this matter, what is important in this regard, or what this fiqhi argument is, or what this theological discussion, concludes. It was none of that. It was just the basic practice of those acts of worship that would be pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This for me, this hadith reminds me of that kind of Islam, that beautiful, simple practice of religion that was just relevant to someone's individual life. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept all of our elders, our ancestors who have passed. So like I said, I wanted to go into this hadith in 3 sections. So the first section is just an examination of the narrator, the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, Jabir ibn Abdullah, radiyallahu anhuma. Like I said, both him and his father Abdullah, both are, give me 1 second here, guys. Both of them actually are companions of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, just some background about Jabir ibn Abdullah. The first thing is that he is known as Al-Ansari. So he is from Medina. He is actually from the tribe of Khazraj. But despite being from one of the larger tribes in Medina, he was actually from a relatively poor family, a significantly poor family, actually. So this is, something that, you want to know about him and his lens on life and on the world. In addition to that, he was, although he participated in many of the battles that the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims engaged in, even after Rasulullah ﷺ, Jabir ibn Abdullah was not allowed to participate in the Battle of Uhud. And that is because his father and his elder brother were going, and his father and elder brother, they're 2 members of his family, but then he has so many sisters. He has 7 sisters, according to the reports. And so, if all 3 of those men lose their life, then there's no one to care for the family. And so he was told to stay behind, and he was allowed to stay behind. And as it is in the books of history, both his father and his elder brother were made shaheed in the Battle of Uhud, and essentially he was left with his sisters to take care of them. There's also this really interesting story how the Prophet ﷺ did not allow for the burial of his father Abdullah to take place, even though he's shaheed, to take place until his debt was paid off. And he invited the community, he invited Muslims from Medina to help to pay off his debt, right? And that reminds us of the importance of taking care of our affairs, or taking care of the affairs of our loved ones who pass. We don't just ignore this stuff, right? We have to make sure that, if we really love them, we don't just, speak sentiment about them, but we make sure that they are taken care of even after they're gone, by making sure that their affairs are in proper order. As I mentioned, he took care of his 7 sisters. Now, like I said, he's from this poor family. He doesn't have much to his name, but it was during the Battle of the Trench when Jabir ibn Abdullah was part of the troops, and he looked at the Prophet ﷺ, and he saw on the face of Rasulullah ﷺ, he saw anger, and it just didn't sit with him. He couldn't take it. He just got up and he goes back to his house, and he tells his wife, I see hunger on the face of our beloved Prophet ﷺ. I just can't sit with this. And so they devise this plan that they have some grain for bread, and they have a small goat that they also had been feeding and taking care of. And so he says, let's go ahead and prepare a meal using these items for the Prophet ﷺ, and I'll go and privately tell him, oh Messenger of Allah, come to my house. There's a small meal. Just select a few people. And his wife tells him too, this is not a lot of food, so you need to be careful. Otherwise, this will be a disgrace for you in front of everyone. If too many people come and you're not able to feed all of them, don't disgrace us. Don't disgrace me. So he goes to the Prophet ﷺ while his wife is getting things ready, and he says, "O Messenger of Allah, quietly, would you please accompany me? I have a small meal, and just select a few of the people that you'd like to bring." So the Prophet ﷺ, he has this big smile on his face, and he gets up and he just makes this really really loud announcement, as loud as he can, saying, "O people of Medina, O Muslims," calling to the troops essentially that are around him, "Jabir ibn Abdullah has prepared a feast for you." And so Jabir is he's sweating bullets at this point, and there was no bullets back then, right? But he's like sweating, and he's like, okay, that's not what I meant. And so the Prophet ﷺ, accompanies him. They go before everyone else, and he's telling him, I don't have enough. And so the Prophet ﷺ gives him some special instructions, saying, go ahead and prepare the stuff, but I'm going to participate in some of the preparation. The Prophet ﷺ participates a little bit in the preparation of the food. And we know that one of the miracles of the Prophet ﷺ, according to many reports, is that his saliva had some miraculous capacity, including healing and other things. And so he actually put a little bit of his blessed saliva into both the goat, that was being prepared, as well as the pot of goat, and then also into the bread that was being prepared. And then he said, just go ahead and prepare this. And as people started to arrive and the food was, getting prepared, the stories mention, and this is, widely reported, that all of the individuals, many individuals came who did not have food of their own. They came and they ate and they fed and they ate to their fill. And even afterwards, there was food left over. So again, one of the small little miracles from the life of the Prophet ﷺ, through the house of Jabir bin Abdullah. Just a beautiful little story that I wanted to share that gives you some perspective on this particular companion. In addition to this, I also want us to make sure we are aware of the individual who's asking the question, right? Because he says that I saw a man come to the Prophet ﷺ and ask him these questions. And what is it that we need to know about this man? So, the scholars of hadith, the people of knowledge in this particular field, they make some observations about this individual, some insights. They mention, number one, that he must be an outsider, particularly because of the nature of his question, and also because his name is not mentioned, right? If this is a regular of Medina, then his name would probably be mentioned. He'd be known, right? Even if he's not well known, Jabir ibn Abdullah, the Prophet ﷺ, these people, they would know his name. And so he's probably an outsider, maybe not even from the city of Medina, maybe even from a distant area. The second point that they observe is that he must, based on the nature of his question, he must live a very simple life, right? He's not asking about very complicated things. This is well into the onset of Islam and all of the complex teachings and halal, haram, and Ramadan and zakah and things that, things have developed. It's been many years of Islam being preached in Medina even now. Yet he's asking a very simple question, and so he's likely a very simple man, maybe a Bedouin from outside of the cities. And number three, they observe that he's also very likely new to Islam. And immediately there's some lessons and some observations that are valuable here. Especially that, that this man, he captured the attention of Jabir in a way that Jabir ibn Abdullah, felt important to narrate this particular incident and this particular conversation. And he probably felt that connection to this man, that, this man is living a simple life and isn't necessarily capable of, doing some of the very complex aspects of Islamic practice, and, paying zakah maybe or going for Hajj, but he's looking at these very simple things about Islam, which was something that Jabir ibn Abdullah could himself relate to. The second thing that I think we have to go into here now is the prophetic wisdom. And like I said, this is my favorite part of the hadith examination. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in this moment, we see some of his life. I have to ask you a question though, in order to kind of for you to get to what I'm trying to get you to understand here. In this hadith, right? It's in the books of hadith. In this hadith, how many words are actually from the lips of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Think about this, right? Go back to the text of the hadith, right? The man says, "Ara'ayta idha sallaytu al-maktubat wa sumtu Ramadan wa ahlaltu al-halal wa haramtu al-haram wa lam ajid ala dhalika shay' adkhulu al-jannah." Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Na'am." That's it. So how many words did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam speak? He spoke one word. He spoke one word, guys. The entire hadith, only one word is from the Prophet ﷺ, which, I mentioned this before, the Prophet ﷺ is a man of few words. That's part of it. He didn't feel the need to, elaborate any further, but also it gives us an insight into the nature of hadith as well, right? It's not just that hadith are statements of the Prophet ﷺ, do this, don't do that. Right? It's that the hadith are teaching us the wisdom of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The first thing, the Prophet ﷺ does not do almost any of the talking, right? He just allows the man to speak. He allows him to do most of the talking, and he listens, right? We learn this beautiful lesson about listening. Oftentimes people want to, they come to us for advice, or maybe they're not coming to us for advice. They want to speak to us. And we have not internalized the value of just listening to people, hearing them out and understanding them and, kind of internalizing what they're telling you. We're already ready to, issue our verdict, to share our advice, to, bless the world with our wisdom. Look at the Prophet ﷺ, the wisest of the wise, just listening and then one word, right? And that is the wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ. That's wisdom. We see the value of taking time to understand the condition of the individual, right? In the question that he asks, he is revealing much about himself, right? He's revealing much about the way he's thinking. He's revealing much about, the things he's worried about. Even in looking at him, he reveals much about where he comes from. And he reveals much about, what his life is like. The Prophet ﷺ must have taken all of these things into account when he came to the calculation that the best thing he needs to say at this point is just na'am, yes. And that's it. Yes, and a smile, and then move on, right? That's all you need. Yes, right? And, it's us who overcomplicate things oftentimes. Here I am taking one word of the Prophet ﷺ and spending a half hour on it. I hope that this is beneficial. But the point is that we're sometimes overcomplicating matters of Islam, and especially when we start getting into like technicalities and things that that may distract people from the real message. And I'll get to that in a second. Also, by the way, when you listen and when you take into account, somebody's circumstances, their life, their realities, you really do prepare them for whatever it is that you are going to offer them. Even if it's just a simple yes and a smile, or if it's something more complicated, if it's something that you need to tell them, hey, take it easy. I'm not sure, not sure about what you're saying. Whatever it is, you prepare them by first listening and letting them know that they have your ear and they have your heart. The second, aspect of the prophetic wisdom here is just in the response itself. Again, all he said was na'am. He did not even further elaborate on additional fara'id. I mean, think about this for a second, right? The Prophet ﷺ did not say, yes, and don't forget Hajj. I mean, is Hajj not an obligation of Islam? Right? Okay, so maybe Hajj is complicated and it's still being developed. The Muslims are still in Medina. All right, what about zakah? Is zakah known amongst the people at this time? Absolutely, right? Zakah has been known for years at this point, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ simply responds, na'am. He doesn't even say, hey, wait a minute, don't forget about Hajj, don't forget about zakah, don't forget about these other complicated things. He just kind of keeps it very simple. The Prophet ﷺ understood the status, the condition of the seeker. He understood that this person doesn't need to know even something like zakah, which may be a fard. The Prophet ﷺ is not elaborating on this because he understands that that's not what he needs at this time. The Prophet ﷺ is not neglecting a fard. Of course, he's the Prophet. But he is understanding that that's not what needs to be brought up in this context, in this conversation. This guy is not here for complicated knowledge. He just needs to know if this is going to be okay, right? Also, the Prophet ﷺ was not worried. This is a thought that sometimes may cross our mind when maybe in this situation, if we're asked, right? The Prophet ﷺ was not worried that this man is going to go and then misguide other people, right? And he's going to go somewhere and say, oh, the Prophet ﷺ just said I have to pray and fast in Ramadan and I'm good. I don't need to worry about anything else. The Prophet ﷺ was not worried about this person leading other people to misguidance, right? He understood the need of this individual and just spoke to him as an individual, right? And it reminds us that not only was Islam, during the Prophet ﷺ's prophethood built over a period of 23 years, even well into those 23 years, when somebody was coming new to Islam, when somebody was coming with the basics, Rasulullah ﷺ allowed them to build from those basics. He did not rush them into building something that they could not maintain, right? This is what he needs to go over right now. Let him focus on those things. Right? As opposed to, and we talk about this a lot when a convert comes to Islam and then everyone wants to teach him the complicated matters and make sure that he's following this fiqh and that madhab and that tariqah, right? We need to take it easy on people, especially when they are still building their faith, whether they've recently converted or if they have been Muslim for life but just now are taking it seriously. Whatever it is, we need to let people build their faith. And just the third thing that I think we should cover before we conclude is just taking this hadith beyond face value, especially as we apply the prophetic wisdom that comes from this hadith, right? So we can look at the content here, right? Some people, could take this hadith, again, if you're just reading at face value, to mean that there is no need for them to do anything beyond the fard, right? So they say, okay, the question is, I pray my daily prayers, I fast, and I maintain the halal, and I stay away from the haram, right? So this just means the fard aspects of Islam, and I add nothing more. Am I good to go to Jannah? And the Prophet says, yes, yeah, you're good. So somebody might take this literally and say, oh, this means that all of the nawafil, all of the extra acts in Islam, right? Sunnah prayer and fasting on these days and all this stuff, that's absolutely unnecessary. All I need to do is just the fard. Okay, at face value, if that's all you can get, there's a problem. Because if you're actually mindful, if you're actually thinking about what the Prophet ﷺ is saying and understanding what this hadith is about, you actually would reach the opposite conclusion. right? And let me explain to you what I mean. Number one, the idea of keeping halal and keeping haram, right? For somebody who lives in the middle of the desert, like this man, who is just, his life is, he wakes up, herds his sheep, spends some time with his family, his food is from what he, from his herd, right? Maybe they gather some things as well. Maybe they trade for a few things like clothing and trade for, some fruit or something like this, right? But at the end of the day, all that's his life is, his occupation as a shepherd and living in the desert. If someone lives this level of simplicity, right, then the idea of maintaining those things that are halal and those things that are haram, it's very simple. It's very confined to that person's life. That person does not need to worry about whether these stocks are halal or whether this type of zakah is due on his wealth, or that type of zakah is due on his business. He doesn't have to worry about these things. It's actually quite simplified for this person. But as life gets more complex, as we add complexity to our own lives, so does the idea of maintaining halal and haram, right? And you have to be honest with yourself, right? Instead of just taking this literally, you ask yourself, are you seeking a simple life or are you seeking a complex life? I mean, when you go and buy the latest piece of technology, are you seeking simplicity or complexity? When you seek, to get a promotion at work, complexity or simplicity, right? When you want a bigger house, when you want to move to a different city, when you want to, get involved in that organization, when you want to, hang out with those people, the more and more we bring into our lives, not that those things are bad, but the fact is they are complexities in our life. We cannot assume that our lives are the same as, a simple Bedouin in the middle of the desert, right? We bring that complexity into our lives. And as we bring things into our lives, it becomes our responsibility to understand what is halal about them, what is haram about them, and maintaining those things, right? So, 21st century Muslim American living in, Sacramento or San Francisco or someplace like this, where they're installing 5G internet and, you're worried about the next promotion at work. I mean, these are different kinds of complexities than somebody who lives such a simple life. We don't live the kind of life where we would just simply practice, like I mentioned earlier, grandmother's Islam. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean that we need to understand the difference. And the second point here about going beyond just the face value, there's another narration in which the Prophet ﷺ has this conversation with another Bedouin man. He comes and he says, if I just do the prayers, am I good? So the Prophet ﷺ says, yeah, but you should do more. If I just fast in Ramadan, am I good? Yes, but you should do more. And he goes down the list of some of the fard aspects of Islam, and he ends by saying, I'm just going to do the very basics, and I'm not going to add anything to them. I'm going to just do the very basics, all of the fara'id, and I'm not going to add anything to them. And will I then enter into Jannah? And the Prophet ﷺ tells him again, it's similar to this, yes. And then he adds, and the companions hear him say this, aflaha in sadaqah. If he is truthful, if he can actually achieve that, then he'll be successful, right? He says that this, if that's what he's able to maintain and achieve, then fine. Dakhala al-Jannah in sadaqah. He will enter Jannah if he is truthful to that statement. But what's the reality, especially of our lives, right? It's basically a statement that the Prophet ﷺ is saying, yes, go ahead. If you are certain of the completeness and the wholeness of your prayers, of your fasts, of your zakah, of your, the fard aspects of your religion, if you're certain of that, if you're certain that you have not committed sin while Muslim and committed transgressions and, wronged other people, if you're certain that all of your income is from halal, if you are certain that you have maintained all of the fara'id of Islam, then, and you feel no need to add any of the nawafil, fine. Okay. But the fact is, if we're honest with ourselves again, most of us will say, no, we are not certain of that, right? Most of us will understand then that actually what this hadith is teaching us is not that the nawafil, the sunan, it's not that they're not necessary. In fact, that they are absolutely necessary. We need them because we know that we're not focused in that prayer. We know that, that one week during Ramadan, we were really, not of the best character. We know that, although we try and, earn money from halal sources, we, there are some discrepancies in that, right? And the places that we've invested, there's some discrepancies there. And the people that we hang out with, sometimes we engage in, not the best of conversations, right? We know that the fact is we have not maintained that perfection of those things which are required of us, those obligations. So we take the sunnah as a mercy. We take them as an opportunity to make up for all of the things that we've fallen short on. And so I want to conclude with, again, number one, that this hadith is actually teaching us that the obligations on their own are not enough, right? If we're honest with ourselves. And anybody who is practicing those obligations with sincerity will probably tell you that they really keenly observe the sunnah and the nawafil anyways, right? And so this is for my concluding point really is about what I want to call like an Islamic ethos. In this hadith and in the lessons of this hadith, I think we're reminded of the importance of an Islamic ethos. And what I mean by ethos is like an Islamic character and culture and like habits and behavior, like not just the technical requirements of Islam, but the character and the personality of Islam and of the people who maintain this religion, of the people who keep to those requirements of this religion, that call themselves Muslim and practicing Muslim and seekers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? In a way, this hadith is a rejection of ideas like shopping for fatwas, right? Looking for ways out of something that in your heart you should be doing, right? It's a rejection of literalism, right? You read this hadith literally and you just miss almost the entire meaning, right? It's a rejection of getting caught up on the technicalities, and people do this a lot, right? Well, technically that's not haram technically that's not halal, because we get into these technicalities and we make things difficult. Oftentimes ourselves, we do this because we're open to making things difficult on other people, right? And this is problematic, right? It does not reflect the ethos of Islam, right? That character of Islam that I'm talking about here. And I want you to I'll leave you with this last example. Think of a structure. You're building a structure and you've been given bricks to build the structure. The bricks may be strong, right? They may be, of good quality. And you can build something great with these bricks, and you start building this structure. Would you build this brick structure without mortar? Mortar is like the stuff that goes in between, right? It's the sticky stuff, the concrete, the cement, right? That would dry and keep these things in place. Would you build this brick structure without the mortar? I think anyone who's wise would say absolutely not. You need that as well. It's just as integral. It's just as important. It holds those bricks together and it allows the structure that you build to increase in its integrity, right? Otherwise, you might build a wall of just bricks, but something hits it hard enough and the whole thing will fall apart, right? One of those bricks has a flaw in it and the whole thing could fall apart, right? The mortar is essential then. So what you need to do, what we all need to do, is think of the Islamic ethos, this character of Islam, that think of that as the mortar between the bricks that holds the bricks together. The bricks are like the obligations, right? They're the obligatory acts that we know we're supposed to do, our prayers and our fasting and our zakah and all of this stuff, right? Think of the Islamic ethos as the mortar. And what does that that ethos include? Well, that ethos is particularly filled up with the sunnah, right? The acts of worship that are not fard, the sunnah prayers, the extra fasts, the giving in charity, right? Charity was such a huge thing for the companions. They would do it so regularly, right? The adab, the behavior that you engage in with each other, all of these things are what you find in the mortar, right? That holds this structure and helps to increase the integrity of the structure, and gives those bricks, those obligations, their support that they need. So this is the few lessons that I wanted to derive out of this particular hadith. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to enlighten us with the words and the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to help us to see and understand the snapshots from the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that we have not had the opportunity to be with him in this life, but we've followed him nonetheless. We ask you, Ya Allah, to make us amongst those who will be in his company as we enter into your Jannah. Allahumma ameen. Jazakallah khair, brothers and sisters, for tuning in. A couple of quick reminders. Number one, please do support our efforts. You can do that via Venmo, or you can go to the live.tarbiya.org website and find opportunities to engage in other acts of worship or learning. You can find opportunities to serve. We have a project now where we are making masks for healthcare professionals. We have a project where we are delivering groceries every day. There's new deliveries taking place for those who are unable to go shopping for themselves, and also an opportunity for you to give to support our work. Inshallah, we'll see you all during Quran Teen, or maybe next Friday. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.